And to analyze this situation, I'm joined by Dahlia Scheindlin, a pollster and political strategist, and by Jeremy Saltan, political strategist and advisor for the Yamina list. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Jeremy, I want to start with you. The U.S. support for this kind of move is so critical, and the American position at the moment is unclear, and there's a lot of withering and dithering over this. Can Israel proceed with such a critical move without full support of the United States?
You know, thank you, Alec. Today is a beautiful morning. It's a great day to apply Israeli sovereignty. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And I was sitting at this very table at the establishment of this government when Netanyahu announced this as one of the cornerstones of what this government was supposed to do. At that very time, I said, nothing's going to happen July 1st, everybody. Everyone's like, no, it's going to happen. A lot of people, such as Dahlia, were very worried about it. I said, you don't have to worry. Netanyahu has now been prime minister for over 14 years. He's never done anything like this before. I would love to see him do it. I call on him to do it, but I just don't see it happening. In terms of the American position, my understanding is that this is a decision they're leaving to Netanyahu. You know, we're not a client state. We're not a proxy. We do have sovereignty in some parts, at least, of the land of Israel, and it's a decision for the Israeli government to go ahead and make. We've heard this countless times from Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State. We've seen, in fact, calls even from many within the Israeli circle to go ahead and just have Netanyahu go ahead and announce it before waiting for anything. This is stuff that can happen. It could have happened a long time ago, but it's not going to.
All right, Jeremy Saltan, I'm going to go over you here to Dahlia. Under most provisions of previous agreements, the major settlement blocks would remain inside Israeli territory. And now we're hearing talks of perhaps an incremental annexation, a partial annexation of, let's say, only the settlement blocks. Why shouldn't Israel go ahead and annex those territories and improve its position if they are going to be part of Israel anyway, under all deals that are envisioned?
Let's explain what annexation is. Annexation is the unilateral acquisition of territory by force. I'm saying the word unilateral, but you don't actually have to say it. If you acquire territory by force, it is by definition unilateral. If it wasn't unilateral, you wouldn't need force. If areas are supposed to become part of Israel under an agreement, that's a very different situation. Then the people who are involved, who are residents of those areas, the Palestinians, have agreed to it in that hypothetical case. Now, that's never happened. We've never reached an agreement. Therefore, anything Israel does that forcefully acquires the territory, and I mean forcefully because, of course, it was territory that Israel occupied during a war, is illegal under international law, is undermining the right of self-determination for Palestinians, and would be a grave blow to any prospect for the two-state solution. But just to go back to something that Jeremy said, I don't think that I was so worried about it as an analyst. As a citizen, maybe I think it's the wrong thing. But as an analyst, I basically agree with Jeremy that I never really expected something like this full plan to be implemented on July 1st. Annexing 30% of the territory, the Jordan Valley. I always thought that it would be reduced to something very incremental, because when you ask how that's different from previous negotiations, what's really not that different is the incremental process of annexation that's been going on the ground physically and in other technical, legal, and administrative ways pretty much since the 1967 war.
I want to ask Jeremy, we're seeing that you're basically saying, and you've been saying, that Netanyahu was bluffing. He was never going to go through with this move, maybe because Netanyahu is a savvy international player and he realizes that Israel simply cannot pull this move off.
You know, Netanyahu is a very good political operator, and he understands, and we see this in the polls, sovereignty is worth a lot of seats. This is what the Israeli public wants to see. You know, and I know there are my friends on my left that don't agree with me, but the fact is that when Netanyahu said that this is what he's going to do, after going to the White House and delivering this, he ended up getting the highest showing out of all 9 times that he served as the leader of the Likud party. Usually by your 9th election, you're probably not at your peak. Netanyahu was able to go ahead and say, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And he went ahead. He took my party's voters by promising this. So it's very clear that he wants this. And look, he has an opportunity now. He's not getting along with Benny Gantz. He can crash the government, throw it on Ashkenazi and Gantz, and we can go into this story over and over again.
But
because
Jeremy, I want to ask you about something. You're saying that this is broad support in the Israeli public. And
yes.
That's not necessarily true. Dahlia, you were going to jump in over there.
It's remotely true. First of all, I think there's a dispute about whether Netanyahu really succeeded in elections for this reason. After all, he promised something to do with annexation.
So why did he succeed?
Let me finish. Ahead of every election in April, in September, and in the most recent election in March. Sometimes he did better, sometimes he did worse, but he always had an annexation promise right before, so I'm not sure if that's the reason. But what I do want to say about the Israeli public, something that I find remarkable, and I don't think, we both deal with polls. On this issue, when you look at the numbers, there's very little dispute between left and right. I haven't seen a single poll, including those commissioned by right-wing think tanks, that show an absolute majority of the entire Israeli public for this annexation. The best I've seen is 50%, and that is conditional on American support. Now, I will also say that all the polls that I've seen are in total agreement that this is extremely low priority for the Israeli government. In fact, for the Israeli public, in terms of what the government should do, in fact, last priority. So I fail to see how you can make the argument that the Israeli public is supporting.
I would love to show you my internal polls.
Jeremy, I'm so sorry.
I'm looking at public polls and internal polls, and they're remarkably consistent.
We're going to have a chance to continue this conversation. Jeremy, you're going to have a chance to respond fully, but first we have to go out to a short break.